Hey everyone, Pocky here, and I wanted to do another Tavern talk, this time on Heroes in Battlegrounds. If you didn't see recently, Mitchell Lowen tweeted this, and he's a dev on the Battlegrounds team, asking what your favorite heroes are and what your least favorite heroes are. Now, that might not seem like that big of a deal, trying to get some insight on what heroes your player base likes and which ones they don't. But it is a big deal when you look at a lot of the personalities and players that have pretty strong opinions that something needs to be done about heroes in Battlegrounds. There's a lot of heroes that many players don't view as playable, or even worse, fun. Right now in Battlegrounds, there are 81 heroes. That's a lot. When we compare that to how many have been removed, there are only 8 removed heroes, one of them being Diablo. The other 7 that have been removed are Bartendotron, Giant Fin, Lady Vaj, Nefarian, Professor Putricide, Sylvanas, and Tyrion Fordring. These heroes were removed a long time ago. And the most recent removal of any of those heroes outside of Diablo, who was specifically added as an event hero, was Nefarian in November 2020. So we're talking almost a year and a half since there's been a proper removal of heroes, and most of those heroes were removed very early on. Professor Putricide was removed 3 times. Giant Fin was only in the game 2 weeks. So we're talking about a very select group of heroes that got removed. However, we have a lot of heroes now that could probably make an argument that they should be joining that group of removed heroes. Now, why is that? Well, let's dig into the stats. So if we look here, I have the HS replay top 1% stats for the current patch. Now, this is still a very small sample size. Out of those 81 heroes, only 44 of them appear on this list. We have it sorted here by average placement, and we'll do a quick scan through. Again, this is from HS Replays tier 7, but it's a pretty short list. Like the speed at which we can scroll through it is pretty quick. And if you look at the pick rate, it doesn't even go below a certain point, because most of the heroes that aren't in these 44 are picked very infrequently, and only when you sort of are forced into that decision. Now, part of the reason that there's so few heroes that are able to be picked is because there's a huge disparity in their power level. So at the highest level, if you're not hitting a hero that does a lot with their hero power, has a lot of flexibility, or is getting a significant advantage, that hero isn't going to be viable for you to pick up a win. However, in their recent post going into their insights and balancing Battlegrounds, the dev team made clear that while the high level community does matter to them, they're also balancing for lower level players as well, right? And this makes sense. They make up the majority of the player base, and you want the game to be fun for the majority of your player base as well. So let's talk about that for a second. If we go to the all players section of the HS replay heroes, we do get a selection of all 81 heroes. Now, to be clear, these stats are not from the Battlegrounds team, but rather a collection of stats from players that use the hsreplay.net tracker. So it won't apply to everyone, and certainly there is a large part of the player base missed out on, but it should be relatively representative, and we do see all 81 heroes present on this list. Now, the big thing here is that we have a lot of heroes that, if we sort by pick rate, are picked very frequently. And that's great. These are interesting, fun heroes. However, as we get further down the list, we start to see that there are still a lot of heroes hovering around the 10% or less mark. And these heroes all have something in common. Well, 2 things in common. A, they don't win very much. And B, they're not very interesting or fun to play. That's something that I think needs to be addressed more than anything in Battlegrounds right now. with the recent changes to the minion pool, things are feeling pretty good. Maybe not perfect, certainly there's always room for improvement, but things are flexible and dynamic minion-wise. Hero-wise, it's a little different story. We have heroes like Rat King here, Illidan, Cthulhu, Kael'thas, Patchwork. We go down this list. Most of these heroes are simply giving stats for a gold cost or even for free, but it's a passive ability. It's not that fun or interesting to play. When you compare that to other heroes like Jandis or Toki, Barov, Eudora, or even some newer heroes like Varden Dawngrass or Master Win, Scabs, and Tess. These are all interesting heroes with a lot of decisions to be made, right? Decisions are what makes a strategy game fun. They're what makes it feel like you can influence the game, right? Because when you make a decision, when you make a cool play, you can get rewarded for it. That's gratifying and satisfying, if I do say so myself. On top of that, the flexibility provided by making those decisions oftentimes mean the hero's going to be better, because your ability as a player can shine through and really drive some of that success. That doesn't apply to all these heroes, but certainly a lot of them it does. There's a few heroes that I want to talk about specifically that it sort of comes up with. Galewing is a new one where it is really interesting the decisions you have to make, right? Especially when Eastern Plaguelands was a more viable use of the hero power. Having to make that decision between the 3 hero powers is a super cool idea. Compare that to something like Drektar or Vandar or Pyramad. Some of those heroes, you just use the hero power, right? It's free, it's a benefit. Okay, it's not that interesting. It gives some extra stats, it might help in combat a little bit, but it's not doing anything for you in the shop phase, outside of some very niche situations, and it's not that good in the context of the game either. It's not going to be something that translates to wins, right? Because if you're not having fun making decisions, at least you could have fun winning. Not too many people are having fun when their decisions don't matter and it's still resulting in a loss. Something like Pyramad, you have to decide whether it's even worth 1 gold to add for health. So none of this is super new or groundbreaking or revelatory or anything like that. The question is, how do we address this? And my thoughts are twofold. 1, I'd love to see more removal of heroes. I think in general, people have talked about that the dev team might not be willing to do this because they've sold skins for them. However, when you purchase a skin, it does add a disclaimer that you might not always be able to use those skins. I think people would be willing to make the sacrifice of not being able to use those skins temporarily for the game to be in a more playable state more consistently. If you're not picking those heroes, you're not using those skins anyways. And while those heroes are removed, one of the nice things is that you can work on reworking them and redesigning them to be more dynamic, more interesting, more fun. This is good for higher level players that will have more decisions to make, and the lower level players that are looking to try out some more fun things and not so worried about the results of the game. The other thing I'd like to see is more reworks, as discussed, and potentially a rotation of heroes. One of the things that I talked about at the beginning of this video is the disparity in the power level, right? If you compare something like Guff or Pyramad to some of the top tier heroes that we've seen before, like Maiev or Zarella, it's hard to make an even comparison between them, right? However, if you take out certain segments of the hero selections for short periods of time, you can reduce that disparity and create interesting shifts in the meta, right? If you leave in a lot of those heroes that do give stats, maybe you can have a more tempo-oriented meta. Whereas if you leave heroes in, they can do more greedy things like Maiev, Rafam, even Millhouse at times. Then you might have a more greedy oriented meta, and those metas can all be fun without having the issues with heroes not being selected or, considered unplayable, because it's all relative. The other change that I'd like to see is the more minor adjustments and quality of life changes happening to heroes more frequently. So take for something the Pyramad that we've discussed before, or Sindragosa, right? We can make Pyramad have something like a targeted hero power, and it's not going to break the game. Sindragosa is something that could maybe freeze or unfreeze, or be able to be used multiple times per turn so that you'd be able to select all the minions in a shot that you'd like to freeze. Something like Rat King could have a preview of what hero power they're going to have next turn. These aren't things that are going to break the game or make the heroes too strong, but even if they were, as you're adjusting these heroes, if you're making these changes more frequently and these smaller changes, it's less likely to be felt in a super negative way by the player base. And I know that some of that stuff is a little bit easier said than done, but it's definitely something I'd like to see aimed for in the future. I'd love to know what your guys' thoughts are on your favorite heroes and least favorite heroes in response to this tweet, or in the comments below. In addition, let me know what you think about the hero system and what your solutions are, what you think of my solutions to the hero system. And while you're at it, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel because it helps a ton. We'll see you on our stream, twitch.tv/PockyPlays. And thanks for watching. As always, peace.